Ladies and gentlemen, happy Constitution Day! I'm Jeff Rosen, the president of this wonderful institution, which is the only institution in America created by the U.S. Congress to increase awareness and understanding of the Constitution among the American people. Today, we are launching this exciting new program called the Interactive Constitution Virtual Exchanges, which will unite classrooms across America from Ohio and Kentucky to California and Maryland to discuss the First Amendment. And we're doing it in collaboration with the New York Times and the College Board, and citizens across America can check it out online. Ladies and gentlemen, we are so privileged today to hear a talk about the First Amendment from our Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. Round of applause. Secretary DeVos has been a clear, powerful voice for the importance of protecting free speech across America. Today she's going to talk to us about free speech on campus, and to inspire us for her talk, I'm just going to begin by reading the text of the First Amendment. And I need my constitutional reading glasses to do that, but here we go. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. To talk about the meaning of the First Amendment and the crucial importance of protecting it today, please join me in welcoming U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, for that kind introduction. I'm really grateful for all that you and the National Constitution Center do to increase awareness and understanding of the greatest political document in history. Before we begin, I want to say that my heart goes out to all those that are impacted by Hurricane Florence. I know there were those that wanted to be with us here today but couldn't because of the storms. Someone dear to me and to this center, my father-in-law, Rich DeVos, would have liked to be here too. He loved this center. Thank you for your prayers and heartfelt condolences during a tough week for me and my family. I'm also very grateful that my husband, Dick, is here with us today. Thanks for being here, honey. And thank you for commemorating this day. Constitution Day brings focus to the importance of civic education and its essential role in the health of our constitutional republic. Our Constitution became the standard for freedom-loving people throughout the world by design, not by accident. The framers gathered just a few steps from here 231 years ago, willingly and freely, to discuss, debate, and propose to the states a national government that would restrain itself by empowering its people. I'm honored to be here to discuss some of the first restraints placed on government by our Bill of Rights. Our first freedoms and what we do with them shape our lives. The freedom to express ourselves through our faith, through our speech, through the press, through assembly, or through petition defines much of what it means to be human. This freedom, preserved in our Declaration of Independence, comes from the truth that our rights are endowed by our Creator, not by any man-made government. And for a time, that was self-evident. But along the way, these founding principles have been taken for granted. Today, freedom and the defense of it is needed more than ever, especially on our nation's campuses. The fundamental mission of formal learning is to provide a forum for students, like all of you here with us today, to discover who they are, why they're here, and where they want to go in life. These are formative years, times and places to learn, to be challenged, to grow, and to make mistakes. Learning is enriched by what each individual student brings to that experience, if and only if that environment is free and open. Today, precious few campuses can be described as such. As the purpose of learning is forgotten, ignored, or denied, we are inundated daily with stories of administrators and faculty manipulating marketplaces of ideas. Take what recently happened to a student at Arkansas State University. She wanted to recruit for a student organization she was founding, but soon learned it first had to be approved by the university. Even then, she still had to apply for a permission slip to distribute materials. And all of the activity had to occur within the confines of a speech zone, typically obscure, small, cordoned-off corners of campus where free expression is permitted. These so-called free speech zones are popping up on campuses across the country, but they're not at all free. The Arkansas State student proceeded to set up shop and was promptly removed by a university administrator and a campus police officer. She's suing, and a judge recently allowed the action to proceed. Students at Lawrence University in Wisconsin recently hosted a screening and discussion of a documentary that warns of the threat modern sensibilities pose to comedians, to their humor, and ultimately to their speech. When the event was announced, it sparked passionate and disruptive protests, which continued into the screening itself. As a private university, Lawrence is not directly bound by the First Amendment, but it had promised its students free expression without fear of censorship or retaliation. Yet the university ultimately denied official recognition to the student group that had hosted the screening. Ironically, the student group's name was Students for Free Thought. The screening at Lawrence University continued in spite of interruptions, but not all student events are so lucky. An official student activities board at the College of William and Mary, a public campus in Virginia, recently hosted a director of the American Civil Liberties Union for a discussion on free speech. Almost as soon as the event got underway, students rushed the stage and began to shout down the ACLU representative, an organization typically allied with many of the same causes shared by those who were shouting. The event never resumed. College administrators vowed to remedy the situation, but the heckler's veto had already prevailed. This veto has been used against me as well. More than a few institutions have been unwilling to provide a forum for their students to discuss serious policy matters that affect our country. I can and have found other forums, but what about students who cannot? Too many administrators have been complicit in creating or facilitating a culture that makes it easier for the heckler to win. One prevalent way is when administrators charge students exorbitant fees to host an event or speaker they arbitrarily deem controversial. This way, administrators can duck accusations of censorship based on content and instead claim that reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions are appropriate. But just ask students at the University of Michigan for more on that. When students invited Alveda King, the niece of Martin Luther King Jr., to speak on campus, administrators forced the group to have public safety officers patrol the event. There were no disruptions, but students were billed hundreds of dollars for the security anyway. Students elsewhere have been forced to pony up thousands in speech taxes for hosting speakers on campus. The examples could go on, but I think the point is clear. When students come to learn, they too often encounter limits on what, when, where, and how they can learn. Administrators too often attempt to shield students from ideas they subjectively decide are hateful, or offensive, or injurious, or ones they just don't like. This patronizing practice assumes students are incapable of grappling with, learning from, or responding to ideas with which they disagree. Such limits on freedom are sometimes subtle. Other times they are noisy. But both are rampant, and both are bad. All too often, students do not learn about our Constitution and our freedoms in the first place. I think of a survey conducted some years ago by Philadelphia's own Museum of the American Revolution. It found then that 83% of Americans did not have a basic understanding of our founding. In fact, more Americans knew that Michael Jackson wrote Billie Jean than knew who wrote the Bill of Rights, or even that those rights are amendments to our Constitution. What does that say about America's schools? According to the 2014 Nations Report Card, only 18% of eighth graders had a proficient knowledge of American history. And in previous years, high school seniors did even worse. Only 13% were proficient or better. Just think about the real-world consequences of those sobering statistics. When students don't learn civics or how to think critically, should anyone be surprised by the results of a recent Brookings Institution poll? It found that over half of students surveyed think views different from their own aren't protected by the Constitution. Is it any wonder a growing number of students also say it's okay to shout someone down when they disagree? And is it any wonder too many students even think that violence is acceptable if you disagree with someone? Now, disagreement about deeply held beliefs can certainly fuel passions and raise decibels. But violence is never the answer. No one should confuse the right to speak with an invitation to use force. Administrators may think they're doing their part to reduce tensions by censoring certain ideas, but in fact, doing so often inflames them. And the way to remedy this threat to intellectual freedom on campuses is not accomplished with government muscle. A solution won't come from defunding an institution of learning or merely getting the words of a campus policy exactly right. Solutions won't come from new laws from Washington, D.C., or from a speech police at the U.S. Department of Education. Because what's happening on campuses today is symptomatic of a civic sickness. The ability to respectfully deliberate, discuss, and disagree, to model the behavior on display in Independence Hall has been lost in too many places. Some are quick to blame a tribalization of America, where groupthink reigns. Others point to the rise of social media, where under the cloak of anonymity, sarcasm and disdain dominate. Certainly, none of that improves our discourse. But I think the issue is more fundamental than that, and it's one governments cannot solve. The issue is that we have abandoned truth. Learning is nothing if not a pursuit of truth. Truth, and the freedom to pursue it, is for everyone, everywhere. Regardless of where you were born, who your parents are, or your economic situation, truth can be pursued, and it can be known. Yet students are often told there is no such thing. A Rand Corporation study recently found an alarming truth decay in American public discourse. One culprit was identified as a relative volume and resulting influence of opinion and personal experience over fact. I think of the teacher who blithely wears a shirt that reads, "Find your truth." Poor advice that's plastered on the walls of the classroom for her unsuspecting young students to absorb as well. That notion has taken root in our relativistic culture. Surely we've all heard something that goes like this: you have your truth, and I have mine. Folks who embrace this notion insulate themselves from other people, other experiences, and other ideas. Serious conversation is over. The pernicious philosophy of relativism teaches that there is no objective truth. Nothing is objectively good or objectively evil. Truth is only personal point of view, fleeting circumstance, and one's own desires. And those views, those experiences, those desires can be understood only by those who live them. Nothing else and no one else matters. And that, I posit, is the threat that America's campuses face today. Our self-centered culture denies truth because acknowledging it would mean certain feelings or certain ideas could be wrong. It is much easier to feel comfortable in saying there is no truth, nothing that could challenge what we want to believe. But learning is about thinking, reasoned argument, and it's also about discovering facts. If ultimately there are no facts, if there is no objective truth, then there is no real learning. Abandoning truth creates confusion. Confusion leads to censorship. And censorship inevitably invites chaos on campuses and elsewhere. This is not simply a matter for academics to debate. Parents are watching how institutions of learning are resolving these controversies, and many don't like what they see. Recent surveys indicate public support for colleges and universities has declined over the last several years. But it doesn't have to be this way. There are alternatives. Let me offer a few thoughts in this regard. Begin with yourself. In our fast-paced, noisy world, it's healthy to develop an interior life. Be still. Pray. Reflect. Review. Contemplate. Starting with ourselves, with introspection, would help us approach each other with more respect and grace. Then listen. Really listen. And then personally engage with those with whom we disagree. It's easy to be nasty hiding behind screens and Twitter handles. It's not so easy when we're face to face. When we are, we more quickly recognize that behind each strongly held idea are heartbeats, emotions, experiences. In other words, a real person. And if we use our 2 ears proportionally to our 1 mouth, we can speak with conviction when we're certain and listen with intent when we're not, humbly leaving open the possibility that even when we feel quite certain, we might be quite wrong. We would also do well to rightly understand the responsibility that goes along with freedom. Yes, free speech is both a right and a responsibility. St. John Paul II said it well. Freedom consists not in doing what we like, but in having the right to do what we ought. His reminder is fitting today because we're not all saints. We won't always do the right thing. We will make mistakes. We will say the wrong things and subscribe to the wrong ideas. There are bad ideas. I've had a few and heard more than a few myself. But the exchange of ideas should be conducted openly, where good ones can rightly defeat bad ones, with open words and open dialogue, not with closed fists or closed minds. John Stuart Mill wrote that anyone who knows only his side of the case knows little of that. To that end, we can embrace a golden rule of free speech, seeking to understand as to be understood. That is to say, a willingness to learn from any idea, even ones with which you disagree or ones that aren't your own. It's also the humility to listen with the understanding that you yourself might be mistaken. A responsible use of free speech in this sense is a desire to prove why your ideas are better for your neighbor because you love your neighbor, not because you only want to prove him or her wrong. I think often, and even more so this past week, of phrases my father-in-law used all the time. Among them are, "I'm wrong," "I'm sorry," "Thank you," "I respect you." and I love you. Some folks get this right. Princeton's Robbie George and Harvard's Cornell West don't agree on much. But the two professors recently wrote an instructive statement about freedom of thought and expression. All of us, they wrote, should be willing, even eager, to engage with anyone who is prepared to do business in the currency of truth-seeking discourse by offering reasons, marshaling evidence, and making arguments. The two professors respect the freedoms of students to express themselves through peaceful demonstrations, but they ask, might it not be better to listen respectfully and try to learn from a speaker with whom I disagree? Might it better serve the cause of truth-seeking to engage the speaker in frank civil discussion? Those are important questions. At least one university is leading the way in addressing them. Since its founding, the University of Chicago has always affirmed a commitment to free and open inquiry. A committee there recently reaffirmed that commitment in a statement of principles, not new policies or codes. In its report, the committee wrote that the university guarantees the broadest possible latitude to speak, write, listen, challenge, and learn. The committee rightly suggests it is for the individual members of the university community, not for the university as an institution, to make judgments for themselves and to act on those judgments not by seeking to suppress speech, but by openly and vigorously contesting the ideas that they oppose. More institutions would do well to adopt the University of Chicago's statement and embrace its approach. Others look to Yale's 1974 Woodward Report on free expression. Without sacrificing the pursuit of truth, the report's authors explain, an institution of learning cannot make its primary and dominant value the fostering of friendship, solidarity, harmony, civility, or mutual respect. Instead, those priorities are responsibilities assumed by each member of the university community, along with the right to enjoy free expression. Too many institutions have tried to pursue truth and harmony, but ended up failing in both. Jonathan Haidt, a psychologist and professor at New York University, argues that institutions of learning cannot pledge to pursue truth and at the same time oblige a welcoming atmosphere, civility, or even social justice. The latter are to be voluntarily embraced by each member of the community. A school, on the other hand, must make a choice as to its purpose. Let's call it Haidt's choice. Pursue truth or pursue harmony. An institution of learning cannot be both a forum for all ideas and an advocate for some at the expense of others. And learners have a choice to make as well. No school and no government can force its people to be responsible. That's something individuals must freely and consciously choose on an ongoing basis. True freedom is ultimately ordered toward virtue and responsibility. Freedom detached from truth and disconnected from virtue isn't freedom at all. America is exceptional because of her freedoms. Not simply because they are in the Constitution's text, but because they are an intrinsic part of who we are. The world knows that and craves it. Thousands upon thousands of people risk everything to escape tyranny and flee to the United States for a better life, for freedom. But if we lose freedom here, Ronald Reagan warned, there is no place to escape to. America is the hope for the world. Let's resolve to get back to believing in and living out our freedoms in the ways our framers and our Creator designed. May we forever cherish, teach, exercise and protect our God-given freedoms. Thank you for having me here today. I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Secretary DeVos, for an extraordinarily eloquent, compelling, and inspiring defense of the principles of free speech and freedom. You have powerfully reminded us of the framers' vision in insisting that speech could only be banned if it was intended to and likely to cause violence. You've talked about the crisis on campuses where that is challenged with things like the heckler's veto. You've described the crisis in civic education where majorities of American students believe that hate speech can be banned, even though the Supreme Court has unanimously said the opposite. And you've provided us with some very inspiring solutions, including looking into ourselves and mastering our passions and listening respectfully to each other. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Secretary DeVos for her wisdom. I want to say, too, that Rich DeVos, your father-in-law, the former vice chair of the National Constitution Center, and one of our most passionate supporters, would have been proud of your speech and so happy that you were spreading the light in such an eloquent way. I want to ask, of course, about the crisis in civics and other things that we can do to address it, because it's so urgently necessary. You argue compellingly that government solutions may not be the answer. The Constitution Center, of course, is trying to provide an answer by creating this wonderful online interactive constitution, by uniting citizens in person and online to debate respectfully, and by bringing the best scholarship from different perspectives to America. How can we persuade voluntarily public schools, charter schools, and underserved communities to adopt these wonderful resources, because it's so urgently important that we do?
It's such a great question, Jeff, and let me just say congratulations to you and the whole center on the way that you continue to innovate and make the important founding documents of our nation even more accessible and available to students of all ages across the country. I think this online access, the iterative and the screen that you were able to show us before we came here today is absolutely fascinating. And I think that if students get a taste, if they get to experience it even a little bit, they will want to dive in deeper. And I would argue those that are particularly keen on civics education and learning more about history are going to have one of the most valuable tools they could possibly have right at their fingertips. So we can help spread the word, and I hope that we'll be able to do so, and I hope that all the students that are here today will find something that you take home from your visit here today to share with those who weren't able to come today, and that you will help ignite in your fellow students a curiosity around the history of our country, but why that's relevant not only for today, but for tomorrow as well.
Thank you so much for that, and thanks for inspiring the students. And dear students, please download the app. It's the Interactive Constitution. Not now, of course, because we're having this conversation, but after the talk, and then pick an amendment you didn't know about and learn from it. And as the Secretary said, it's really a choice we face every day. Are we going to spend our time surfing the web, or really learning and developing our faculties of reason? And that's a responsibility and opportunity that all of us have. You spoke so eloquently about the need to protect reason and the framers' hope for civil agreement and disagreement. As you're talking to these students about the need to protect even the speech we hate, as Justice Holmes called it, what would you tell them? Why is it so important?
Well, without having freedom to express ourselves, no matter how we might feel about somebody else's expression of an opinion or perspective, even as abhorrent as we might feel that is or might be, without having the freedom to do so and without the ability to do so without threat of retribution or violence, we don't really have a free nation, we don't really have a free society, and I think that's one of the most critical pieces that our founding fathers saw in forming this nation.
Very well said. I don't have a clear answer to this, but I wonder if you do. How have we gotten here with the crisis of civics, where a third of Americans can't name all three branches of government and only a third can name all three? How did this happen?
I think it's a good question. I think it's probably a lack of attention over a period of years. And I remember my civics and government class being my favorite class in high school. So I recall with great fondness the study of history and civics and government. But I'm not sure that it's been a priority. It hasn't been a focus. We've been focusing a lot on math, science, and reading, which are all, of course, very important subjects. But I think it's really important that that students learn about the history of this nation, that they are here to actually protect and enhance from this day forward. So I would encourage all schools to look anew at how they are addressing this really important facet of a child's learning and education.
I think that's a crucial part of the puzzle. We've put so much focus on STEM and on math subjects. We've forgotten the teaching of history, and the founders insisted that citizens be educated in the science of government, as George Washington said, not just education in general, but history in particular. And studies show that citizens who are educated about constitutional principles are more likely to support judicial review and independent judiciary, not to want to overturn judicial decisions by popular vote than those who are not. So it's so crucially important.
Well, and we know that there's so many interesting facets of our nation's history. I mean, you only have to look at the popularity of the Broadway show Hamilton to understand that there's a hunger for this, and there are ways to present it in ways that are really relevant and appealing to today.
A rap musical about the separation of powers would help a lot, and it's exciting to see people respond to these great shows. One more question and then opening out to the audience. I'm so glad that you called attention to the University of Chicago principles, which are so inspiring in articulating what the Supreme Court has said the First Amendment requires, and Chicago really has been a leader here. Maybe just say a few more words about why you think it's important for other universities to follow their lead.
Well, they've been consistent in this regard, and I think their recent restatement of those principles in an environment where there's a lot of question around students' ability to freely express themselves on campus. I think it's a model that other institutions have a responsibility to look at for themselves. And I actually had a conversation this weekend with someone who I won't name that unbidden brought up to me the fact that that institution was looking at adopting the same or very similar policy out of a desire to ensure that students have an environment, they're assured of an environment that respects and acknowledges the importance of free speech.
Thank you so much for that. You also mentioned Greg Hite. He has a great new book on free speech with Greg Lukianoff, and they'll both be here on Thursday at the Constitution Center.
Very
so
good.
That'll be wonderful. Dear friends, students, questions for Secretary DeVos.
So this is, okay, one second.
There's a mic.
Okay, so this is how we're going to do it.
How are we going to do it?
It is on. Hello? Can you hear me now? Good. Okay. So I'm Curry. This is Jenna on the other side. What we want you to do is raise your hand. We'll come over to you, give you the mic. You just want to let us know your name, how old you are, and what school you go to. And the mic will be back on by then. So start with our first student right here. So could you please stand up for me? Go ahead. All you.
Hi, my name is Taylor Black from Constitution High School, and I'm 16. And my question is, what are your goals for low-performing schools before your term is over?
Goals for?
What are your goals for low-performing schools before your term is over?
My focus as secretary is on making sure that every single individual student has an opportunity to get a great education. And my desire is for every student to be able to go to a school that works really well for him or her, and that they are challenged well, in those schools. And so our focus is going to continue to be on challenging local schools to do better on behalf of the students that they're serving. And I hope and pray that every single child will have the opportunity to fully develop every God-given talent and gift they have, because we need every single one as part of our country, as part of our society.
Okay, we have a question over here.
My name is Harry Kane. I'm 13 years old, and I'm a 7th grader at St. Mary Parochial. And my question is, with free speech, does that include, like, in-school debates? Is that, like, the right to free speech?
Well, I would say that having an opportunity to debate in your school context is a really important part of learning. And the debating clubs and societies that I have been familiar with, I assume they're probably pretty similar today. It's a really good forum to discuss ideas and to get differing viewpoints aired in the context of a more formal environment, and I think they're a really good and important part of learning.
Hi. Is it on? Is it on? Okay. I love what you said about free speech, but I personally feel that our current legislation is the prime example of attacking people's views that are not similar to their own. Especially the points you made about hiding behind screens and hiding behind Twitter handles. Don't you feel that that example should be brought to our current government? It kind of seems like the current legislation is supportive of free speech, but only if it fits their personal agenda.
So I think you might be assuming that there's laws where there aren't specifically laws. And my comment with regard to social media and the ability to sort of hide behind an anonymous veil is one that, while sometimes it's important to be able to communicate something anonymously, if you're in some way threatened physically or whatever, but the distance, the separation that really occurs between someone who puts something out on social media without really considering the receiving end of that communication, I think doesn't help with the overall discourse. I think that it has a really important role, but I think that we're best off when we're able to sit down and talk about things that we may agree on or disagree on, and talk about them, face to face or in a small group setting. I think that generally brings about better results and better understanding or respect for one another's opinions.
I'm Maxine. I'm 13 years old, and I'm also a 7th grader at St. Mary in a parochial school. Being Secretary of Education, does it conflict with anything in your personal life?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's probably one you could better ask my husband. It's been, to be very honest, it's been a challenge in our lives. My husband and I have been married 39 years, and right now he, lives in Michigan, and I have to be in Washington, D.C. So it makes it difficult to spend the kind of time together that we really enjoy spending together. But that said, I'm grateful that he has supported me in this really important role, and he, along with me, know that serving students and our nation's future is a really great opportunity, and so we're honored to have that opportunity.
Hi, my name is Ciara Collins. I'm from Constitution High School, and I'm 17 years old. Why do you believe you're qualified to serve as an educational secretary with no experience in the public school system?
Well, first of all, let me just say I'm the mother of 4 children, and I believe that parents are the primary educators of their kids. And for 30 years, before I came into this job, I worked to help all students especially students that come from families where they can't make the choices that my husband and I have been able to make for our children's education. We have worked to empower parents to be able to make those choices for their children. If the school that they've been assigned to isn't working for them, we want parents to have other choices and other opportunities to make sure their child finds a place that fits and that works for them. So that 30 years of experience working, I think has more than qualified me for the role I'm in today.
Hi, I'm Maria. I am a student at St. Mary's. I am 12 years old and I'm in 7th grade. I have a question about going from books to online so that we don't break our backs with homework going home and back to school. So do you believe that we could get a better education if we connect it to stuff we know how to use, like iPads and computers? Or do you think that the books are really fundamental? Because I would like to know, because we have a bunch of books in our desk and we kind of have to cram everything in. We have shelves we could put our hard books on. So I just want to know, maybe it can make us, our lives a little bit easier learning. And yeah.
So I think there's a really important role for technology in education. And I don't think that we've fully explored the extent to which technology can help you and help all your fellow students learn. I think that there's also an important role for books. I go back and forth personally between reading a book on an electronic device or turning the pages of an actual book. I think there's really places for both of those, but I think we have a long way to go to really fully explore how technology can help in learning and help in education.
Good. Thank you, Secretary DeVos. Thank you for the Constitution Center for hosting this. My name is Joe. I just graduated from Point Park University out of Pittsburgh.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I feel like for myself, I've been on the front lines of this this free speech movement on campuses. We've had speakers silenced. We've had threats made against myself and other people. And I wonder, the civic duty and everything starting at an early age for students is vastly important. But I fear that there's a genuine, almost monopoly at the higher ends of education into almost what Jordan Peterson calls the postmodernist cabal of teachers and administrators. So how do we get diversity of thought into our higher education system? Thank you.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your graduation. I think it's really important to talk about these things and to not pretend that these issues don't exist. I think there's more and more discussion around this recently, just in the last few years, about the importance of having a wide range of opinions expressed on campuses of higher learning, or any campus for that matter, and having receptivity to hearing from those perspectives from students as well. I think just raising up the issues and bringing forward this conversation is ultimately starting to have some impact. I think it has to continue, and I think that we're starting to see some movement, I think, in the direction that we need to go to embrace a wide range of perspectives and thought.
We have a question from behind you.
Hello, my name is Jarif, and I'm 11 years old. And my question is that, did your parents motivate you to become what you are right now?
Oh, that's a very good question, Jeremy. My parents motivated me to pursue the things that I was interested in. So, for example, I played the drums in junior high and high school. My mom and dad they were not musical, but they supported me, and it was unusual for a girl at that time to be playing drums. They cheered me on, just as they cheered me on in all kinds of other pursuits that I had. And so, yes, they were very motivating to me to become everything that I could be, not to be just like them.
Okay, everybody, I hate to do this because I know there's a million questions, and this is such a great opportunity for us to ask questions to people in our government and running our government, but we actually have to end it right now. So turning back to you, Jeff.
Well, thanks for that, Curry. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking, for a really inspiring talk about free speech, the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful Constitution
Thanks, everyone.
Day. Bye. Thank you.